They called it Vault 9, the final place. No one returned from it. The Galari hegemony declared it sealed. A tomb of dead experiments and broken warriors. When transmission cut out, they wrote him off as another human casualty, Darian Reeve, last known operative of the Terran Recon Division. One more ghost added to the long, bitter list of humanity's extinction. They didn't see the twitch in his hand. The air was metallic and thick, alive with the hum of alien biotech. Darian stirred, breath ragged, mind crawling back from the dark. His suit was torn, the oxygen system failed, and his HUD pulsed a single word: compromised. He should be dead. He wasn't. The Galari had left him with a collapsed lung, shattered ribs, and a neural inhibitor stabbed into the base of his skull. But he was breathing. Barely. Humanity had fought the Galari with everything it had: orbital strikes, cyber warfare, plasma-tipped spears hurled by dying tribesmen. It hadn't mattered. The Galari adapted, dissected, and crushed. Earth was gone. Mars was glassed. Luna cracked open like an egg. What was left of the Terran species was scattered across deep space, hunted and hidden. Some enslaved. Some bred for experiments. Some, like Darian, volunteered for suicide missions. He wasn't supposed to survive. No one was. Vault 9 was a sealed Galari biovault on Nemeus, a moon classified as hostile even by their standards. The mission had been to sabotage the Vault's central command node before capture. Darian remembered charging in with a cry that barely echoed before the walls swallowed him whole. Then nothing. Until now. His hand gripped something cold and wet. Not blood slime. Alien. He wiped it off, revealing the shattered helm of a Galari sentinel. There was no head inside, just bone fragments and black fluid. The beast had been torn open by something, not human. Not him. He pulled himself up, stumbling as his boots crunched over the fractured floor. Everything around him pulsed. The walls were alive. They breathed, flexed with internal rhythms. Organic plating stretched across the halls, illuminated by veins of dim bioluminescence. A Galari vault wasn't built. It was grown. Darian scavenged what he could. A plasma carbine stripped of its charge, an alien blade fused to a neurogrip handle, half a ration pack. It would have to be enough. His HUD flickered again, briefly displaying unfamiliar glyphs before powering off. Whatever was in his bloodstream now, it wasn't just blood. His body had been tampered with, patched together by the Vault's emergency medical systems, not designed for human biology. He'd been experimented on. There were screams, distant, muffled, not human. He moved, step by step, through a corridor of horrors. Cells made of bone and membrane pulsed with life, each one containing things better left undescribed. Former prisoners, failed fusions, things the Galari didn't talk about outside the vaults. Their ambition had limits, but their curiosity did not. A whisper echoed in his head. Not a sound, a presence. Something psychic, probing. Testing. The neural inhibitor sparked. Darian fell to one knee, gripping his skull as static flooded his mind. A voice, alien and deep, tried to anchor itself inside him. He resisted, pushing it out with sheer rage. With grief. With memory. He remembered his sister's last breath on Europa Station, her lungs filled with fire as he carried her down the collapsing corridors. He remembered his mother, volunteering to hold the line with a plasma rifle too large for her frame. He remembered Earth, blue and defiant, before the Galari fleet carved it apart. The voice receded. He stood. The further he went, the less familiar the architecture became. No guards. No security systems. Just growing silence. The vault wasn't deserted. It was waiting. At a junction, Darian found the remains of a Galari fire team. Their weapons hadn't been discharged. Their armor was shredded from within. One soldier's helmet cam still blinked red. He tapped it. A flash of footage, static, then screaming, then a towering creature moving like liquid metal. Eyes glowing blue, teeth of crystal, and then darkness. Darian didn't flinch. Whatever it wasn't invincible. Nothing was. He moved deeper into the vault. Each breath was agony, but each step was purpose. He wasn't here to escape. He wasn't here to hide. He was here to finish the mission, and if possible, to kill every last thing the Galari had locked away. Not because he wanted revenge, not anymore, but because humans weren't meant to be remembered as victims. They were meant to be feared. The air grew colder, the walls more fluid, as if the vault itself were aware of him now. Darian moved without hesitation. Pain sharpened his focus. His human instincts, unpredictable, wild, began to surface. He wasn't trained for alien architecture, but he didn't need to be. He adapted. Every turn, every organic corridor, every shift in ambient hum told him something. The vault breathed in patterns, and he was learning to read its breath. He passed what looked like an arena, walls caked in blood, claw marks scoring bone metal. Something massive had been here, and recently. Scorch marks on the ground showed plasma discharge, but not from any Galari weapon. Darian stepped over the shredded remains of something with scales and talons. Not Galari, not human. Movement. He dropped low as a creature rounded the corner. 12 feet tall, armored hide, glowing veins of bioplasma running through its neck. It sniffed the air. Apex beast. The Galari's genetically engineered war titans, bred for planetary annihilation. One of the old models, unstable, too expensive to mass produce. It shouldn't have been alive. Darian backed into the shadows. Its vision was movement-based. He waited, counting heartbeats, then threw a shattered piece of bone across the corridor. It turned. He moved the other way. He knew better than to fight it. Not yet. Not without tools. He found a control node sealed behind a semi-organic panel. He cut it open with the alien blade, hands shaking slightly as the interface spilled out like intestines. He pushed the neural grip into the port, risking connection. A surge of information hit him. Memories not his, thought patterns designed for Galari minds. Pain lanced through his skull. The inhibitor screamed. He didn't disconnect. He endured. The vault's memory opened. It showed him a recent override from a high-tier command node. The Apex King had been here, personally. He had inspected the vault's performance failures. Humans, he had said, were inherently incompatible with perfection, but useful for chaos testing. Darian's lips curled into a humorless smile. They thought he was a test, a data point. He could work with that. Deeper into the vault, he reached a genetics lab. Slabs of meat, nerves, armor plating, and spines floated in nutrient gel. Dozens of Apex models, some fully grown, others in phases of decay. There were notes in Galari script. Phase 9, unstable aggression response triggered by human audio stimuli. Full override required. Termination recommended. They were afraid of his voice. He walked past the chamber, searching the walls for something useful. He found a chamber marked with red glyphs, Galari quarantine. Inside, it was colder than ice. Stasis pods, ancient, covered in dust. Experimental enhancements banned by their own ethics councils. He opened one. Inside, a black bodysuit lined with nanofibers and hardpoints. No visible power source. A breathing mask fused with a spinal cord. He didn't hesitate. The vault had kept him alive this long. If it wanted him dead, it would have finished the job. He tore off his suit and slid into the new one. It grafted into his nerves immediately. Pain tore through his spine. Vision swam. A second heartbeat started, metallic and steady. The inhibitor short-circuited. His mind opened wider. He heard the vault whisper. The suit was a failed prototype for psychic synchronization, designed to interface directly with the Apex King's command cortex. Darian wasn't Galari, but the system didn't reject him. It adapted. He felt everything sharpen. Sound became a map. Light bent into patterns. His thoughts sped up. He didn't just move. He predicted. He calculated probabilities. He became a variable the Galari hadn't prepared for. Apex level signal pinged the chamber. The king was aware. Darian smiled. He returned to the control node and forced a manual override, triggering a cascade of system faults. The vault began to shift, corridors opening that hadn't existed minutes before. Escape was no longer the goal. He had a route, a direct line to the inner sanctum. The Apex Beast was back, guarding the access point. Darian didn't run. He lunged. The suit responded faster than thought. He dodged under a plasma swipe, planted a shaped charge in the beast's underjaw, and vaulted over its shoulder. The detonation turned its head into molten slag. He didn't stop moving. He was no longer human by their standards. But he was human in all the ways that mattered. He reached a viewing chamber, its glass walls overlooking a cathedral of genetic spires. Floating platforms. Thrones of bone. The Apex King's private chamber. The command signals pulse stronger now, a steady drumbeat echoing in his skull. He tapped into the system again. More data spilled in: battle strategies, genetic logs, psychological profiles. The Galari had studied humanity obsessively. Recorded last stands, martyrdom events, suicide missions. Their fear wasn't of humans winning. It was of humans refusing to lose. They couldn't calculate that. Darian understood now. He wasn't just a soldier. He was proof of concept. The moment he crossed into the sanctum, everything changed. No more whispers. No more interference. The psychic hum cut out completely. It was silent, clean, controlled. The Apex King wanted it that way. It was the only part of the vault still untouched by chaos. A cathedral of power, every surface lined with glistening neural cords, all converging into a throne of fused bone and silver where the king waited. Massive, armored, and coiled like a predator in stillness, the Apex King stared with hollow eyes. Taller than any soldier, leaner than any war beast. This was not a general. This was a creature bred over generations to lead not by command, but by control. Every Galari soldier, every Apex beast, wired to his pulse. His presence alone was enough to instill paralysis. Darian took a step forward. The king didn't rise. He didn't need to. His voice echoed, not in the air, but in Darian's mind. Clear, cold, condescending. You are alone, broken, the last vector of an extinct species. This place will be your tomb. Darian didn't answer. He didn't need to. He hurled the bone blade at the throne, not to kill, but to provoke. It shattered against an unseen barrier. The king finally stood. He didn't move like a brute. He moved like thought. His armor rippled, a living thing, adapting as he closed the distance. Darian's neural-enhanced reflexes kicked in. Time slowed. He sidestepped a lunge that cratered the floor, swung his blade, scoring sparks against the king's side. No blood, no reaction. The king turned and backhanded him through a pillar. Pain stabbed through Darian's ribs, but he forced his body to rise. The suit responded, feeding power to his muscles, stabilizing fractures. Every strike the king delivered tested his endurance, not just physically, but mentally. The psychic pressure was immense. It was like fighting inside a collapsing star. He remembered why he was here. He drew the short plasma spike he'd stolen earlier and jammed it into the floor. The resulting surge created a localized EMP, disrupting the king's neural command field. For a second, the throne room dimmed. The lights stuttered, and the king recoiled, briefly staggered. Darian used the moment. He leapt onto the creature's back, driving the alien blade into a gap in the armor. It sank deep. The king roared, shaking him loose, then unleashed a psychic blast that sent Darian flying. He crashed into the steps of the throne, armor cracked, chest heaving. The inhibitor was dead. The suit was dying. His bones were fractured, and still he stood. The king approached slowly now, curious, almost amused. You resist the inevitable. What? Darian coughed blood, steadied himself, and said only, because it pisses you off. He charged. No strategy, no finesse, just raw, desperate will. The king struck, expecting evasion, but Darian didn't dodge. He absorbed the hit, used the momentum to close the gap, and drove his last charge blade into the king's side. Then he activated it. The blade flared, overloaded, detonating on contact. The explosion flung both of them apart. The king hit the ground, armor hissing and split. Darian collapsed beside him, vision going dark, lungs failing. He clawed his way forward, inches at a time. The king tried to rise, but the neural feedback from the explosion had shorted part of his control cortex. Darian reached him. He straddled the king's chest, drew a jagged spike of alien steel from the debris, and drove it through the king's exposed throat with every ounce of power he had left. The body convulsed. Psychic backlash flooded the room. Darien screamed, head burning as the death scream of 1,000 linked minds passed through him. Then silence. Not the sterile quiet from before. Dead silence. Darien slumped backward, armor barely functioning. All around him, the vault began to groan. Systems flickered. The architecture sagged. With the king dead, the entire network was collapsing. He didn't care. He had done it. He looked at the massive, twitching corpse. Then with trembling hands, reached up, gripped the jagged ridges of the alien skull, and twisted. It came free with a final snap. Heavy, warm. He stared at it, as if to make sure it was real. Then he stood. No ceremony, no victory cry. He just walked, step by agonizing step, toward the exit the king had used. Behind him, the throne room burned. The corridor beyond the sanctum was unfamiliar, but it bent around his presence like it recognized him now. The vault no longer resisted. With the apex king dead, the architecture lost coherence. Lights flickered and biological walls sagged, lifeless. Darien moved through collapsing passageways with the skull clutched in one hand, body broken but mind burning with focus. The suit was disintegrating, peeling off in fragments. Every step was a negotiation with pain, but he didn't stop. Emergency systems screamed warnings in Galari tongue. Vault collapse in progress. Biocore destabilized. Organism fusion protocols unsupervised. It didn't matter. The mission was already over. Now, it was survival, something the Galari never planned for him to achieve. He passed rooms filled with dead things. Creatures bred for war, lying still without the king's command link. A jungle of nightmares now reduced to carcasses. At a security checkpoint, 2 Galari guards stood frozen, receiving incomplete neural signals. Darien didn't slow down. They turned to attack too late. He was on them, skull in one hand, broken blade in the other. The first dropped from a single stab onto the chin. The second raised its rifle, but hesitated at the sight of what he carried. That hesitation costed its life. He buried the blade into its chest and let it fall without a word. He took the rifle. It felt foreign, but he'd learned enough. The suit had mapped their firing mechanism before falling apart. He advanced through sealed gates, forcing overrides with king-level access the suit had retained for just long enough. Biolocks peeled open for him now. Systems treated him like a war asset. That terrified him more than anything else. Vault 9 was dying, but not quickly. The Galari built for contingency. Deep below, reactors hummed with decaying power. Above, transport tubes flickered with emergency override commands. Darien found a lift pod, skeletal and half-functional. It responded to the king's cortical signature, still clinging to the skull. He stepped inside and began the long ascent. As the pod rose, he glimpsed what Vault 9 truly was. Not just a prison or lab, but a proving ground. Entire ecosystems thrived in containment. Simulated invasions played out against captured species. Galari scientists observed every variable. And humans, they weren't the enemy. They were the control group. Test subjects. Tools. That was their mistake. The lift groaned to a halt at a hangar platform, where a small Galari skiff waited. Probably the king's personal transport. No pilot, no crew, just sleek alien metal coated in bioreactive film. Darien limped toward it, rifle low, senses burning. He half expected resistance, but there was none. The skiff unlocked at the presence of the skull. He dragged himself inside and collapsed in the cockpit. Control systems pulsed, waiting for neural input. He jammed the skull into the throne mount where the king's own head had once rested. The ship came alive. He initiated launch. The skiff surged upward, breaching the vault's upper shell in seconds. Nemeous atmosphere tore past, red and thick. Above, space opened, cold, black, silent. The skiff broke orbit without challenge. No pursuing fighters. No alarms. The command structure had collapsed with the king. For the first time in hours, Darien breathed freely. He accessed the ship's navigation. Coordinates stretched across systems. Galari fleet positions, research bases, slaver nodes. He uploaded everything to the last surviving Terran beacon, an encrypted drone orbiting a dead world. It would transmit data back to the surviving cells scattered across the stars. Proof of death, proof of weakness, proof that one human could kill their god. The skiff drifted toward the nearest Terran shadow station, a hollow asteroid used for smuggling and sabotage. He didn't contact them. He just set the ship to autopilot and sat still, staring at the skull resting on the pedestal beside him. It was heavy, but not because of weight. It was a symbol, a declaration. He imagined how the Galari would react, how news would spread across their networks. Their soldiers trained to believe in hierarchy, in genetic perfection. What would they do when they learned the apex of their species had been reduced to a trophy held by a dying Terran? It wouldn't end the war. Not immediately, but it would start something worse. Fear. They had cataloged human persistence, human rage, human grief. But they hadn't prepared for defiance that didn't die. They hadn't accounted for one of them escaping the grave with their king's head in his hands. Not just alive, but victorious. The kind of story that spreads and whispers. In nightmares, Darian closed his eyes. He didn't know if he would survive long enough to reach the station. It didn't matter. The mission was already complete. History had been rewritten, not in reports or broadcasts, but in action, not by a fleet or a rebellion or an army, but by one man, too broken to surrender. One human, walking out of hell with the impossible in his grip.